thank you all for attending this morning. We're going to be going over our new online system called FOResT. We're going to be, Dan Jacobs is going to go over an overview of the whole system. Probably take 40-45 minutes, and then have questions also. We'll take those, and then we'll have probably a 10-minute break. And then after that, I will go in and do a in-depth demo where I'll go through setting up an account as well as submitting a notification through FOResT. This system is new. It's been available to use for, well, almost 3 months now, but we still have bugs we're working on. And if you have comments, suggestions, criticisms of the system as you're using it, we'd love to hear them. The goal here is to make something that will work for all of us. We're replacing a paper process that's been in place for 30 years. So, the change is going to be a little bit painful for all of us. So if we're just open about any suggestions or comments or criticisms, that'll just help us make this better for everyone. I guess lastly, I just want to thank the team that helped develop this. In addition to some outside people testing this, we have our main Forest Service team that included Stephen Nicholas, Adam Cates, Greg Miller, George Harris, Joe Mintz, Don Mancius, Morton Mosswild, and Dan Jacobs. So just again, thank you for taking the time out today to meet with us, and hope this is informative to you. And Dan, I will let you take it from there.
All right, Greg, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
Yep, I can see it.
You do?
Well, I can see your presentation now.
Okay. So is that working?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Dan Jacobs. I'm a district forester with the Forest Service. I cover primarily southern Aroostook County, and I have been helping with these presentations since probably December, and I'm sort of a new member of this team. Greg was the lead on the project, Greg Lord. I've really only helped to test the demo version of this and since last fall. And I'm by no means a computer expert, so I'm probably going to be going through some of this in very simplistic terms, but they make sense to me. Hopefully they make sense to you as well. Like Greg mentioned, this is going to be a brief overview, probably take about 40 minutes. We'll do a 10 or 15-minute break, and then Greg will go into a demo. And I think if there's a topic in the overview that I touch on that doesn't seem very clear at the time, I think it'll become more clear when Greg does the demo. I think that's going to help a lot of people understand the system. Another quick point I want to make before I get into the slides is that I use the term FON, F-O-N, interchangeably with notification. So I just wanted you to know that that's what I'm talking about, is a notification when I say FON. This is the sort of agenda or purpose for the overview presentation. We're going to go through a little bit of the reasoning behind the development of this online system, go over 1 or 2 slides on the history of notifications. We'll do an overview covering the basic functions of the FOResT system. we'll walk through the process, which Greg is going to do live in his demo as well. And then there's going to be a couple of slides regarding the timeline for rollout and getting more information on FOResT. And we've done a series of these webinars, and they're all recorded, and they're on the FOResT webpage. And there's also another webinar that's scheduled for March 31st. So if you didn't get enough of me and Greg, you can come back on the 31st. And please, if you guys have questions, put them in the chat or raise your hand. And if I can't answer the question, then we have a good team of experts with us today that can help answer the question. Probably most everybody on this webinar is aware of the history of the notification process. Came about with the Forest Practices Act of 1989. It's always been a paper process. Paper has always been sent through the mail to the Forest Service. And in fact, if you have a change in your harvest and have to submit an amendment, the amendments have been done by paper. The required landowner reports at the end of the year, also paper. So we have 30 years of paper that have been archived. So there's a lot of kind of issues with that whole system being low tech. I mean, I like paper. I like my paper field notebook and tally sheets, but this requires a lot of data entry on our part. So there's a big time commitment. We also have the storage issue with all these archived files, and there's a lot of postage going back and forth through the mail. And there's also, in some cases, quite a time lag, especially if you're working with an out-of-state landowner. There's another whole process of sending notifications to the landowner to get their signature and then sending it to the Forest Service. So it can be a time-consuming process on paper. This system that's online, I think, is going to take some getting used to, and it's going to require people to get set up. But in the end, I think for most people, it's going to be a faster, more efficient system. And it's fairly simple to use. And like I said, I'm not a computer expert, and I helped to test the demo version, and I found it to be pretty user-friendly. So just a couple of quick things about notifications and the requirements and regulations regarding those. If you want to really get into the nitty-gritty of the regulations regarding notifications, that's the main Forest Service Chapter 26 rules. There's a link at the bottom of this slide. The Chapter 26 rules can also be found on the Forest Service website and on the Secretary of State website. So right now with the paper notification, probably most people are aware that they come with a 6-digit number printed in the bottom corner. This will be changing. With the new online system, it's going to be a 7-digit number, but some of the requirements are going to remain the same. The fawn number is required to be posted at primary yards or primary access to multiple yards when timber harvesting. And the fawn number is also required on trip tickets when wood is hauled. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to touch on with this. If you have any questions about any of the exemptions to the fawn requirements, those are found in the Chapter 26 rules. But essentially, everybody that's timber harvesting with some exemptions has to fill out a notification. This has been mentioned a couple of times. What is FOResT? It's an online system for submitting notifications for timber harvesting. Eventually, I think starting in November, December, there will be the capability to do landowner reports on this system. At the end of the presentation, we'll talk briefly about the timeline for rollout, which has already started. But this system is eventually going to completely replace the paper, maybe with some minor exceptions. Greg and his team have been working on development of this for over a year, I think about 18, 19 months. It's been a good, well-rounded team of folks from the Forest Service and outside partners that have tested the system and provided input. We're always looking for questions or suggestions, as Greg mentioned, to improve the system. And we've had some really good suggestions so far. And these webinars always bring out some very good questions, often questions that we haven't thought of before. I'm going to talk a little bit about the FOResT webpage at the end of the presentation, but that, in short, is a source of a lot of information about the system. So the key features of FOResT, this has been mentioned multiple times, but it's an online system for doing the notifications and landowner reports eventually. I want to stress that this should be a fairly intuitive system to use because it follows the current paper notification very closely. Many of the questions that are asked are identical or very similar. The setup is very similar to the paper fawn. So I think it should feel fairly familiar to folks using the system. There's not a lot of surprises in here in terms of the questions being asked. Everybody who uses FOResT or who's going to be on a notification needs to have an online account, and we'll talk about that in a later slide. One of the really nice features of FOResT is the digital mapping component, and it not only is simple to use, but it provides some pretty good information through the mapping process. I'll talk about that in a little bit. The whole process is step by step. You move from one section of the notification to another, and for most of the questions, or many of the questions, there's a way to get information about what is being asked, and that's what's meant by number 3 here, annotated. One thing that'll come up multiple times through this talk is that you must complete the step you're working on to move on to the next step. So I think a really good benefit of this system, if you've ever received notice that you submitted an incomplete notification, incomplete notification should be very rare now, if not extinct, hopefully extinct. And I think that will be good for everybody, Forest Service and all the folks submitting notifications. The online accounts allow for digital signatures. So everybody that's involved in notification is going to be certifying that the information is correct and acceptable. When a notification is certified and completed, all the parties get notified, and all the parties will get the notification number, which I mentioned is now a 7-digit number. So how do you get into FOResT? I think there's a couple of ways, but I've only always used one way, and that is from the home page for the main Forest Service. There is a little button in the upper right-hand corner, and click on that, and it will take you to the FOResT page. Now, the FOResT page has a lot of good information on how to use FOResT, but it also has a button that allows you to get into the system. So this slide, and I'll tell you that throughout the rest of this presentation, there's a lot of screenshots from FOResT, and they will not show the entire screen in most cases. So you're going to be seeing kind of bits and pieces of a FOResT screen throughout the remainder of the presentation. So this is the starting point when you get into the FOResT system. And the two things I want to point out, hopefully you can see my cursor. There is a button to sign in, and that would be if you already have an account that is set up. And in the lower right-hand corner, there's a button to click on to create an account if you don't already have one. So those are two things that you do from the home page. Okay, I'm just going to go over some of the user functions, and this, in a way, sort of goes through the steps in the process of submitting a notification. Like I said, it's broken into different sections and steps, and we're going to go through all those in a little bit of detail coming up. So if you haven't already, the first thing that you need to do to use FOResT is create an account. I've mentioned before that everybody who's named on a notification has to have an account set up. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Once you have an account, you can sign in. And once you've signed in, you can start a new notification, but you can also view other notifications that are in your account. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Once you've started a new notification, your first step is to identify your role in the harvest. This is another point that I'll bring up again, but the person that is the notifier must be either a landowner or a designated agent. They can also be a forester or a harvester, but the notifier has to be a landowner or designated agent. Once you've identified your role in the harvest and the notification, you move on to the digital mapping of your harvest. This is a pretty nice feature, as I mentioned, and I'll show you some of the features coming up. As long as a notification is in a draft version, meaning it has not been certified, then it can always be edited. Once a notification has been certified, it's basically in a pending mode and can't be changed. And we'll talk about that in a bit as well. So as you're going to see, this is one of the nice features of the system is that you can view and work with notifications in draft form, but you can also view notifications that are pending, active, and inactive. So it's a nice way to sort of manage what you have going on as far as FOResT operations. Creating an account, pretty simple. Like I said, you start from the FOResT page, get into the system, and then there's going to be a button in the lower right-hand corner to create an account. Click on that, and you will be taken to a data entry page where you will enter your name, contact information, and you will need to have an email address, and you will need to set a password. And the password is based on some rules that are required by the state for security purposes. So you'll just have to be mindful of the rules and to get a password to be accepted. Once you have done that, you are going to be, and you've created an account, you'll be issued a FOResT ID number. So to use the system, the main things that you have to keep track of and remember are your email, your password, and your FOResT ID number. And with those three things, you should be in pretty good shape to use the system. And creating an account, like I said, is fairly simple. If you've created an account with Cabela's, it's probably just that simple. If you've used the IF&W website to buy a license or to enter the Moose Permit Lottery, it's probably just as easy as those systems. You already have an account and you want to sign in, again, pretty simple process. The sign in button, if you can see my cursor, that is in the upper right-hand corner of the FOResT page when you start this working with the system. Click on the button. You will be asked to enter your email and password. And once you have hit the sign in button, you will be taken to the dashboard. And from there, you can work with existing notifications and you can create a new notification. And we'll go over that in some detail in just a moment. This is the dashboard page, and there's a few things I'm going to point out. So once you've signed in, you're going to be taken to this dashboard. And I think there are going to be 4 circles that appear. The first shows create a notification. So if that's your intent, then you just click on that button and you can start the notification process. The other thing I'll point out in here is that there are a couple of boxes that will appear. This upper box shows the pending notifications, and those are ones that are awaiting certification. And these have not been issued a 7-digit number yet because they're still in pending status. These can't be edited in their pending status. I think we'll touch upon that again in just a little while. But they can be viewed. If you go over to the right-hand side, you see a view button. So you can, if you click on that, you'll be able to see the summary information for the notification. This box down at the bottom lists all of the active notifications. These are the ones that have been certified and completed. And you can see that these have been issued their 7-digit notification number that will be used to post at the primary yard and used on trip tickets. These notifications also cannot be edited, but they can be viewed. So if you click on view, you will go to the summary information for that notification. The only notifications that can be edited are the one that you're currently working on or ones that are saved in a draft format. The other thing to notice is that on all the FOResT pages in the upper right corner is your FOResT ID number. That's going to appear through the whole process of creating a notification. I've mentioned this before, to be a notifier, you have to either be a landowner or a designated agent. The landowner or the designated agent can also be a harvester or a forester, but one of these two has to be the notifier. So the process of creating a new notification. In this slide, I'm just going to show you the basic steps or sections in the notification process. And we're not going to go into any detail on these at this time, but we will in upcoming slides. So when you're at the dashboard, you have the option to create a notification or to view notifications already in the system. In this example, we're going to create a notification. So click that button. You can see down below in the lower part of this slide, it looks like there's sort of a timeline. And that sort of a timeline shows the different sections or primary steps in the process to create a notification. And this is going to come up again, but you cannot move from one section to the next without completing the section that you're working on. So the overview, that's some very general information. Then you move to the mapping section, which I hope everybody finds a pretty nice feature, like I think it is. Activity details, which you'll see are based in part on the mapping. Then the contacts section, that's where you're going to list all the other parties that are involved in the harvest. And the summary. The summary section is where you review the information that you've entered, make sure that it is correct, and you'll also get some reminders to look through. And then once everything is deemed to be correct, you can certify the notification in the summary section. So we'll go over each one of these steps in a little bit of detail, and then Greg is going to walk through everything in the live demo. So this, we've sort of already gone over all this information already that's on this slide. This is just another way to present what we've already talked about. The arrow that is moving towards the bottom of the screen on the left-hand side, this shows the flow or movement through each section of the process, from overview down to the summary and final certification. And like we've mentioned a couple of times now, you can't go from one section to the next without completing the section you're on. You can always, however, move backwards to work on a previous section or to edit a previous section. As long as the notification is in a draft format, you can always go back. So that's how you are able to move through this process of creating a notification. Now we'll get into each section. And like I said, these are going to be a series of screenshots that do not show the entire screen, but use your imagination, and I think this should work okay. The overview page is pretty basic. This is where you've already signed into the account, so the system knows who you are. You are going to, at this point, identify your role in the harvest, and this is kind of an example as well as an illustration of each section. So in this ongoing example, I'm listed as the designated agent. My name is also Morton Mosswild for this example, which is inaccurate. My name is really Dan Jacobs. So you identify your role in the harvest, and you also indicate the start date for the harvest. You will be given by default the 2-year maximum time frame for a notification. And as always, using the landowner report, if the notification ends before that 2-year window is up, you can indicate that it's completed on the landowner report to close things out. And eventually the landowner report is planned to be done on this system as well. The next piece of this is to enter the property location and details, so the town, the nearest road, and the parcel acreage are entered. And this becomes important because it has a link to the next section. This is the mapping, and the link here is that when you get to the mapping section, the map will be centered on the town that you entered in the overview. The mapping works pretty easily. If you've used Google Earth and Google Zoom or Google Earth or Google Maps, you move around in the map in a similar way. You also zoom in and out in a similar way. I think that the function of the map is pretty easy to understand once you've made a map or two. You have an option to use either a topographic background or aerial imagery for your background. The aerial imagery is the most recent Esri imagery. And as in the paper notification, the idea here is to indicate where your harvest is going to be within a township. And the accuracy, we're not looking for extreme accuracy, but just a good representation of where you think that harvest will be. Another nice feature about this system is that if you are in a statewide standards town or a Chapter 27 town, the zoning will show up. And I need to point out that you have to zoom in to a certain level to be able to see the zoning, but the zoning will show up. I believe in this example, this town is not a statewide standards or chapter 27 town because I can see a water body over here, but the adjacent town must be either statewide standards or chapter 27 because where my cursor is looks quite a lot like a 75-foot stream buffer. So another kind of nice feature of the system. Okay, so the things that you will be digitizing, and digitizing sounds difficult, but it's really pretty easy with this system. You need to create polygons for your harvest areas, and you can have multiple harvests within one town, but only one town per notification. These harvest area polygons have an acreage calculator, which is a pretty nice feature. You will also be putting in road construction or any roads that you plan to build, indicating whether these are permanent or temporary. And there is, for each of the road segments that you build, there is a distance indicator in feet. And you'll also be adding points for water crossing, both permanent and temporary. And the way that you start that process is you can see there are 3 green buttons here on the mapping page. And if you want to create your harvest area polygon, click on harvest. There's another one for road construction and another button for water crossings. And it's really pretty simple, using your mouse to create the polygons and to create the lines and water crossings. Once you have created these, you do have the option to delete and start over again if you think you've made a mistake. But before you save these, there is an opportunity to make edits. So if you feel that this parcel here needs to be bigger, then you can always adjust it before you save it. Once saved, it has to be deleted and done over again. Here you can see the acreage in that harvest area is indicated at 20.1 acres. You see that we have a water crossing that's listed as number 2 here, number 2 in our table, and that's a permanent water crossing. Once you click on a button to create or digitize the harvest area, a road segment, or a water crossing, there will be instructions that come up automatically. There's this gray instruction box that gives you information on how to create the feature that you want to create. And you'll see that through FOResT, there's a lot of, I think there are little circles with an I in them to get information about the question that you're working on. So there is quite a bit of annotation that goes along with FOResT. After the mapping is the activity details section. And the activity details section is based in part on the mapping that you draw. So the location of the map, what kind of town it is in terms of the zoning, where you map your harvest and road, and whether you map water crossings. All those things come into play and will have an effect on the questions that are asked in the activity details section. Some of the questions are standard no matter how your mapping is done or where you map your harvest. Some of the questions that are standard are the tree growth and change of use. As indicated here on this slide, the harvest size has to be smaller than the parcel size indicated on the overview page. If not, I believe you're not going to be able to progress through the process. A change in this system is actually for the change of use question. In the past, with the paper notification, you've had to enter in by hand, sort of pencil in what you're changing the use to, like potato field or golf course. But now there's some broad categories. It's sort of a menu. If you indicate change of use, you'll get a menu to choose from. So like I said, if you have drawn water crossings or roads, there's going to be some questions that pertain to those. If you're working in a statewide standards town, there's going to be questions that are specific to statewide standards towns. So the activity details, again, based a lot on how you've done your mapping and where you've mapped your activities. This is a screenshot of some of the questions, and you'll see here, I think the third question down, the change of use is indicated as no, so there's no menu to select from. If we put in a yes, we would get the menu of options to choose from. The contact section of the notification process is pretty basic, but there's a couple of things that I need to emphasize here. Like I mentioned, the notifier has got to be the landowner or the designated agent, and any other parties that the notifier is putting on the notification. You're going to have their FOResT ID number and last name. So this means this adds a layer of protection to folks. If they don't give you their FOResT ID number, you can't add them to the notification. So I guess keep track of your FOResT ID number. Don't be careful who you give it out to. I guess you don't want to be getting a lot of emails about notifications that you weren't expecting. So the FOResT ID number adds a little bit of protection to you. We'll go through some of the contacts section, and here to continue with the example, I was listed as the designated agent initially, so I'm already in this notification. Now I need to enter the landowner. The landowner and the harvester, as always, are required. And what I need to do that is I need the landowner's last name, and I need the landowner's FOResT ID number. And once I enter those, this is an important step that some people have gotten hung up on. You've got to click this Find Landowner button, and then it will populate with the landowner information. 2 questions to answer here for the landowner is ownership in the state of Maine. These are now not just penciled in numbers. These are a menu option to choose from and acreage ranges. This, I believe, is a new question here on the right-hand side. The ownership type, that I believe came from the landowner reports. And like I mentioned before, these little bubbles with an I will allow you to get information about that particular question. So moving on, this just gives a little bit better shot of the landowner information once it's been populated. So you have entered the landowner last name and you've entered their FOResT ID, and it's populated now with the landowner information. The designated agent, I am pretending again to be Morton, and I've already have my information in there because I indicated I was designated agent in the overview page. The next piece that has to be accounted for is the harvester information. This has always been required on the paper font, still required on the electronic version. So again, enter the name, enter the harvester's FOResT ID number, and hit Find Harvester Operator button. And then it will populate with the harvester information. And you can see here that the FOResT ID is a required piece, and hitting the Find Harvester Operator is necessary for that to populate and for you to move on. Okay, so this is a little bit of a complex section for me as the presenter mostly. It's a series of screenshots that is going to illustrate what you're going to find in the summary and certification section. This is, in essence, the last section, the last big step in creating a notification. And then you're pretty much home free after this if you're the notifier. So I'm going to deviate a little bit from the text on this slide and just kind of give you a little bit of an overview. And what's going to happen here is you're going to review the information that you've already entered into FOResT. You're going to make sure that it's accurate, and then you're going to certify that it's correct. And you're going to do this section by section. You're also going to be asked to look at some reminders that are pertinent to your harvest, and you're going to be asked to certify that you've looked at the main Forest Service contact information that comes up. And the Forest Service contact information that will come up is going to be the district forester and I believe the Forest Health Division. So basically review all the information you've entered, certify that it's correct by clicking some boxes. We'll show that in a minute. And you're kind of on your way. The order that you will be presented this information in the summary and certification. I'm gonna tell you this because it's not going to probably be clear in the screenshots that are coming up. But the first thing that you're going to have to certify is contacts. Then it goes basically in order somewhat: overview, map, activity details, main Forest Service contacts, and then you're going to get the important reminders. And each one of those you're going to have to certify as correct. And then you're going to be able to move on in the process, complete the notification. So this is a summary page, and this is showing the contact information for landowner and designated agent. And you would review that, make sure that it looks correct. And then there's going to be a box at the bottom that you will check to certify it's correct. And until this is completely certified, it is still in a draft form. You can see that circle up at the upper left that shows that it's in draft form. So here is showing the overview page. And if you look at the overview information, agree that it's correct, you can check this little box in the lower right that says, here it says mark as read. Because this was taken from a demo version of FOResT. In the current version of FOResT, it's going to be certify as correct with a little checkbox. Here is some of the important reminders that you are required to take a look at and certify that you've read, certify as correct. So you can see the basic reminders here about checking about local ordinances, being familiar with the rules, and do your planning in advance. There was, let's see, there's nothing in harvest reminders, nothing in road construction reminders, but in our example, we did have a water crossing, and it's stating here that you may be required to submit a PBR form because you're in an organized town and you're putting in a permanent water crossing. So once you've reviewed that information, you can certify that as correct. And once you have certified as correct all the sections that appear in the summary and certification, this button that is grayed out, this certify button, will become active, and you will click on that. So this just shows what I just described, and that you have certified as correct each section of the notification. the certify button becomes active and you can click on that. But we're still not done. You will then get a message that has 3 statements that you need to check off. These will be based upon your role in the harvest as the notifier. So in this case, I'm the designated agent. I will check off that I've read all those statements and I agree with them. And then this acknowledge and certify button will become active and I'll click on that. And your final step is to click OK, and your notification will then be certified and it will go into a pending mode. And you can see up here that now that your notification has been certified and completed, it is in a pending mode. And what that means is that the other parties listed on the notification are going to get an email asking them to review and certify the notification. And once they do, a notification number will be issued. So at this point, because it's pending everybody else's certification, you can't make any changes to the notification. If you find that you need to, you can withdraw the notification, but you can't make any changes to a pending notification. So once the notification has been completed, the notifier has certified that it's correct. All the other persons on the notification will receive an email. The email will have a link to the notification, and all the other parties will then be able to go in and certify and sign off on the notification. And once everybody has signed off on the notification, a notification number, which is now 7 digits, will be issued to everybody that's associated with the harvest. You will be able to then print a posting sheet like you get now, but you can't print the notification or the summary at present. So I think that's one of the things that Greg is working on, is a way to get it so that you can at least print the summary. Right now, you can only print the notification posting. This is an example of the email that was sent to the landowner in our example, stating that a notification has been created and it's currently pending. And this landowner needs to sign into FOResT, review the information, and certify. And the way that the landowner will get into the FOResT system and this notification is through this link right here. Just clicking on this link in the email will take them right in. And I believe they're still going to have to sign into their account to be able to certify this notification. So Greg is going to go over this in some detail in the demo. The timeline has been adjusted a couple of times now. The system has gone live. It went live January 1st, 2021. We've had a number of people using this system. Probably by now there might be a couple of hundred notifications done in FOResT. We are currently still accepting the paper notifications for the time being. The intent is for this system to eventually almost completely replace the paper. And the paper notifications are still going to be valid for 2 years, the maximum time frame. People submitting paper notifications will be able to submit paper landowner reports. Like I said, eventually at some point there's going to be a phase out with the paper, and the FOResT electronic system will be what you use. To get help, I already mentioned this, but the FOResT webpage is pretty good. Greg Lord has put a lot of time into this. I'm sure others have as well, but there's a lot of really useful information on this. So when you're on the main Forest Service webpage and you click on the FOResT button, it's going to take you to the FOResT page. And on there are recordings of all the webinars we've done so far. Probably 7 or 8 webinar recordings are on there. There's how-to videos. There's commonly asked questions and answers. I think that that's up to about, if you print it off, 10 or 15 pages now. So we've had a lot of questions, and we've been able to provide a lot of answers. And so if you still have trouble using FOResT, you can send us an email, or you can call 287-2791, and that will probably go to Stephen Nicholas, and he presently does, I think, all the data entry for the paper notifications. He's been a team member for this project since probably the beginning. And I think if you have to call that 287 number and you get Stephen, whatever your question is, he'll probably be able to help you out. And that's it. And what I can do now is stop sharing, hopefully. And I think maybe Greg will come on and send us into a break unless there's questions that we can answer at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Are there any questions at this point?
I've got a question. Under Find the Landowner, so when you hit that tab, does that list all the landowners that have registered or have a number?
No, and we're working on changing the wording for that button, but it's more of it should sort of say something like confirm landowner. So the first step is, like Dan mentioned, is right above there. You want to put in the landowner's last name and their FOResT ID in those 2 boxes, and then click that button, and that's going to go search the system, and if it finds the match, it's going to display that landowner's information. If it doesn't, it's going to come back and say, double check your information and try again, or something like that.
Okay, so I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is you can't click that button and surf landowners that are in the system.
Correct. Yeah, that's a protection. We just don't want all landowner information out there available for everyone to see, as well as any of the other parties on there.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, this is Laura. What if your harvester does not do email?
Yeah, so that's we're working on some sort of a paper solution for people who don't have computers, and that's why we haven't fully implemented this to go completely online. We're still working on how we're going to address people that do not have computers.
Okay, and if he does get email, am I responsible for training him in this system, or do you guys do that, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, we have, and I'll show you when I start my part. I'll show you the FOResT. I'll call it the FOResT landing page, where we have a lot of resources available where they can be directed to, as well as they can reach out to us directly, and we'll be glad to help.
Okay, thank you.